Have you ever like stopped and really thought about your skin or what about like the lining of your stomach, even your lungs? They're like these crazy fortresses, always under attack.
Yeah.
What's going on, like on a microscopic level to keep them
Yeah.
strong and working, right? Like what's the secret?
Well, that's a pretty vivid image, and it's a perfect segue into what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
We're going to explore the world of epithelial cells.
Epithelial cells.
Yeah, these are the building blocks of those barriers you were just talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically the front line of defense for your body.
Yeah, for sure. And, this isn't just some basic biology lesson, okay?
Hmm.
We're talking about some cutting-edge research here.
Hmm.
We're focusing on some really cool findings from the University of Geneva, working with the National University of Singapore and the Institute of Physical Chemistry in Göttingen.
Right?
They've been studying how certain proteins inside these epithelial cells actually make them strong and help them form these, super important barriers.
Yeah, and the big question we're tackling today is how these tiny proteins, like way down at the cellular level, can have such a huge impact on how strong and healthy our tissues are.
Mm-hmm.
And could they even be linked to, like, our hearing? That's what we're going to try to figure out.
Exactly. And all this amazing information comes from a brand new paper in Nature Communications. That's what we're basing all this on.
Sure.
So first things first, what exactly are these epithelial cells? Why are they so crucial to how our bodies work and stay protected? Like, break it down for us.
Okay, so epithelial cells join together to form something called an epithelium. It's this basic tissue, kind of like a sheet, and it covers all your external surfaces, so your skin, obviously. But it also lines all your internal spaces and organs, like your digestive system, respiratory system, even your blood vessels. It's everywhere. And its main job, protection. It's a barrier against physical damage, those nasty microbes like bacteria and viruses. And it even stops you from losing too much water.
So they're like holding us together and keeping all the bad stuff out. Makes sense. But okay, how do these little tiny cells, microscopic, actually create such a strong, unbroken barrier for us?
That's where those specialized structures called junctions come in.
Junctions?
Yeah, think of them like super tiny but strong protein locks. They connect those epithelial cells together, like really tightly.
Huh.
They're not just simple connections, though. They're like these organized complexes that ensure those cells are all stuck together, forming like this cohesive, tight layer that makes a really robust barrier for you.
Protein locks. Love that
Yeah.
image. So what are the main types of these locks that we got to know about for this research?
Well, the research focuses on two main types, adherens junctions and tight junctions.
Again.
Adherens junctions are like the heavy-duty fasteners between cells. They really contribute to keeping your tissues strong and together. And then you've got tight junctions, which are even more specialized at creating a super tight seal. They control what molecules can pass between cells, kind of like gatekeepers, deciding what gets in and out.
Oh, so like border control for our tissues, deciding what comes and goes.
Exactly.
Can you give us some like real-world examples of how they work to protect us?
Absolutely. Think about your intestines. The tight junctions between those epithelial cells lining your gut, they're super important for controlling how nutrients get absorbed from your food, right? But they also stop harmful stuff, like bacteria, from leaking into your blood. Same thing in your kidneys. Those junctions help filter waste from your blood while keeping the good stuff in. It's all about balance and control. The way these junctions work is critical for keeping your organs running smoothly.
That's wild. So they're holding the cells together, managing what goes through, and now the research also talks about something called the cytoskeleton. What is that exactly, and how does it fit into all of this? This whole cellular defense and integrity system.
So the cytoskeleton is basically the internal framework of a cell. It's this network of protein filaments. It's kind of like the scaffolding inside the cytoplasm, the jelly-like stuff inside.
Yeah, right.
Think of it like the steel beams in a building. It gives the cell its shape, supports it, and it's involved in all kinds of things, like how the cell moves and divides. It's a busy little structure and very important.
Okay, so it's the cell's internal support system, giving it shape and stability. Now, these researchers were really interested in a specific protein in this network called gamma-actin. What's so special about gamma-actin?
Well, gamma-actin is one type of actin protein, and actin is like a major component of the cytoskeleton. What they found was kind of surprising. When gamma-actin's missing, the cells kind of freak out and start making more of another type of actin called beta-actin. And more beta-actin leads to more of a certain myosin protein inside the cell. It's like the cell's backup plan.
A cellular balancing act. So what happens because of this whole gamma-actin to beta-actin swap and all that extra myosin? This is where things get really interesting, right?
Yeah, definitely. They saw this weird thing happen. less gamma-actin, more beta-actin and myosin, actually made the top of the cell, the apical membrane, less stiff.
Less stiff.
Yeah. And some parts of the tight junctions became more mobile.
Uh,
But, and this is super important for how well your barriers work, the tight junctions still did their job. They prevented leaks between cells.
Wait, so the top of the cell is more flexible, some junction parts are moving around more, but the seal is still tight?
Yep.
What does that even mean for us, to have a flexible but secure barrier?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly why this flexibility happens, but it suggests that cells might have ways to adapt to, like mechanical stress or changes around them, without messing up their barrier function. Maybe that extra movement lets them react better to very specific changes.
That's pretty cool. So even though the barrier is still strong, the cell surface flexibility changes. And the study mentions that gamma-actin actually makes this apical membrane more rigid, right? How does it do that?
Well, they saw that gamma-actin forms a network that's just naturally stronger and stiffer than the one beta-actin makes. Think of it like this. If you're building something, using thicker, less bendy materials makes it more stable. Gamma-actin's like that. It makes the top of the cell more firm.
And this little difference in stiffness at the cell level,
yeah.
it has some pretty big consequences, right? Like you were saying before, it's even linked to our hearing.
Yeah, exactly. They found that the stiffness of that apical membrane is super important for your inner ear to work properly. That's where gamma-actin gets really interesting and kind of unexpected. It's directly tied to how you hear.
Okay, tell me more. How can the stiffness of these cell membranes affect something as complex as hearing?
All right, so your inner ear has these special cells called hair cells.
Right.
They're the ones that detect sound vibrations. These hair cells have like these tiny hair-like projections on their top surface that bend when sound waves hit them. The way those hair bundles move and how stiff the apical membrane is, that's what determines how well sound gets turned into signals your brain can understand.
So the hair cells are like tiny antennas for sound, and the stiffness of the surface they're attached to affects how well they work.
Exactly. And this is where gamma-actin comes in. The study found that mice without gamma-actin, their epithelial cells in the inner ear, they had a different structure on the top. And get this, those mice started to lose their hearing over time.
So missing one protein in these cells in the inner ear leads to hearing problems in mice. That's a pretty big deal.
Definitely. They think that a stiffer membrane, the kind gamma-actin provides, is probably needed to handle all the mechanical stress those hair cells experience all the time from sound waves. Without that stiffness, those delicate structures could get damaged or not work right, and that might be why they lose their hearing.
That makes sense, thinking about how much activity there is in the inner ear. So could this research on gamma-actin help us understand and maybe even treat hearing loss in people? What could this mean for the future of hearing loss treatment? Something that affects so many people.
That's the really exciting part. By figuring out exactly how gamma-actin keeps those inner ear cells healthy and strong, researchers might find new clues about why some types of hearing loss happen, which we don't fully understand right now.
Right.
And that could lead to new ways to prevent or treat those conditions, which would be amazing.
It's incredible to think that a tiny protein inside our cells can have such a big impact on something as important as our hearing. It really shows how complex and connected our bodies are.
Absolutely. It all comes back to how much is going on under the surface to keep us functioning.
For sure. So let's wrap this up and highlight the key takeaways for our listeners today.
All right. What we've learned is that gamma-actin isn't just some random structural protein. It plays a huge role in keeping those epithelial cells strong and working correctly. And that affects everything from the barrier function of our tissues, which is like constantly protecting us, to how stiff those membranes in our inner ear are, which is super important for our hearing.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing to see this link between a basic cell protein and something as complex as hearing. Makes you think, right?
It does. And it leaves us with a pretty big question. If changing this one protein can have such a huge and unexpected impact on something like hearing, what other things in our bodies might be connected in ways we don't even realize yet? That's something for everyone to ponder. It really highlights how much more there is to discover in the world of biology.